On our newscast tonight, Korea has 3 new ministers and a new head of the Financial Services Commission. But the shakeup isn't yet complete. There are more changes to come to give the presidential office a fresh start. A year has passed since the UN Commission of Inquiry released a detailed report on North Korea's human rights violation. So far, it has been proven effective in pressuring Pyongyang to address the situation. On a more lighter note, the 5-day Lunar New Year holiday begins tomorrow here in Korea. While some will get to enjoy a long break, there are others who are at their busiest during this time of the year. We have these stories and more coming up, so stick with us.
Good evening, everyone. This is Early Edition at 6, live from Seoul. I'm Nahyun Kyung.
And I'm Daniel Che. Thank you for joining us. It's time for the mass exodus, not as bad as the one in China, but still pretty intense. On the eve of the Lunar New Year holiday, millions of Koreans have begun heading to their hometowns to spend some quality time with family and friends.
That's right. This year, the holiday runs from Wednesday to Friday, with the actual Lunar New Year's Day falling on Thursday, of course. And then we have the weekend, so practically it's a 5-day-long holiday.
We are already seeing traffic congestion on some of the major expressways. According to the Korea Expressway Corporation, it's taking nearly 7 hours to drive from Seoul to the southern port city of Busan right now. Usually it takes 4.5 hours to get to the central city of Daejeon. It will take you about 4 hours from Seoul as opposed to the usual 2.5 hours.
Well, transport authorities say over 33 million people are expected to move around the country during this year's holiday season compared to 27 million last year. And just before the start of the holiday, President Park Geun-hye announced a mini shakeup of her cabinet on this Tuesday. And in the morning, the new prime minister was officially sworn in.
As for the chief of staff, she will wait until after the week's Lunar New Year holiday to announce his successor. Our Choi Yoo-sun has this report.
President Park has tapped third-term ruling party lawmaker Yoo Ki-jun to fill the seat of Oceans Minister, which has been vacant since former Minister Lee Ju-young stepped down late last year. Yoo is close to the president and practiced maritime law in the past. A surprise pick Tuesday was the president's new unification minister. In a likely move to select a figure who's been involved in her policy-making process, she chose her current unification secretary Hong Yong-pyo to head the unification ministry. President Park also named another ruling party lawmaker considered a member of her faction, Yoo Il-ho, as transport minister. That's 2 more pro-Park lawmakers named to the cabinet, making up a third of the body and signaling that the president is seeking better coordination with the ruling party. The opposition side criticized Tuesday's shakeup for falling short of public expectations because most of the appointments are from her camp. For Financial Services Commission chairman, the president tapped Im Jong-yong, a former vice finance minister who also headed a private financial group. With his experience in both the public and private sectors, Im is likely to push for a bold deregulation policy. President Park, meanwhile, accepted her chief of staff's offer to step down in the aftermath of a scandal surrounding documents leaked from her office. Kim Ki-chun's successor, however, will not be announced until after the Lunar New Year holiday. President Park is thought to be giving more consideration to revamping her administration as she needs support to carry out her economic reform drive entering her 3rd year in office. Choi Yoo-sun, Arirang News.
Now, today is the 1-year anniversary of the UN Commission of Inquiry's lengthy and detailed report on North Korea's human rights violations. Although it may not yet have done much to improve the situation in the north, what it has done for sure is build immense pressure on the regime. Arirang News' Hwang Sung-hee has this story.
The UN's Commission of Inquiry launched its first-ever investigation into North Korea's dire human rights situation in the summer of 2013. The 3-member panel met with North Korean defectors and experts in Seoul, Tokyo, and Washington to hear testimonies and collect data.
Forced abortions, trafficking and other indignities imposed upon women, both as prisoners.
The outcome was a landmark 370-page report published last February that outlined North Korea's human rights abuses, including torture, execution and arbitrary imprisonment, deliberate starvation, and rape. It recommended that the regime be referred to the International Criminal Court for possible prosecution of leader Kim Jong-un. Pyongyang's initial reaction was anger, even threatening a nuclear war.
It is necessary to strongly react to the hostile forces attempting to meddle in the internal affairs of other countries under the signboard of human rights.
Then North Korea countered with a different tactic, publishing its own lengthy report on its human rights conditions and releasing American detainees. But all this was to no avail. The UN General Assembly approved a resolution on North Korean human rights, and the UN Security Council held its first-ever discussion on the issue in December. While any referral to the ICC would almost certainly be vetoed by permanent UN Security Council members China and Russia, Seoul is set to open a UN Human Rights Office next month. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
South Korea's chief nuclear envoy Hwang Jun-guk will travel to Russia next week for talks with his Russian counterpart Igor Morgulov. Seoul's foreign ministry says the two officials will discuss ways to restart the long-stalled six-party talks aimed at disarming North Korea of its nuclear weapons. Now, the talks involve the two Koreas, the U.S., China, Japan, and Russia, but the last time all of them sat down for talks was in 2008. Hwang's three-day trip to Moscow comes after he held talks with his U.S. and Japanese counterparts last month and a meeting with the Chinese nuclear envoy Wu Dawei earlier this month. A group of Korean-American doctors are planning to visit North Korea in May for an annual medical exchange. Quoting the U.S. DPRK Medical Science Exchange, Voice of America said the North sent an invitation to 25 medics last month for a forum in Pyongyang. During the two-day medical science forum, the doctors are expected to share their latest findings in the field. Now, the American organization said Pyongyang wants to learn advanced medical treatment methods, including those for cancer. VOA said, however, it is uncertain whether the group will be able to make the trip this year, as the regime has been restricting foreigners due to Ebola quarantine measures since October last year. Korea has slammed Japan for deciding to send a senior official to an upcoming ceremony commemorating Korea's Dokdo Island as a Japanese territory. The Japanese government had said it will send Yohei Matsumoto, a cabinet office parliamentary secretary, to what Japan calls a Takeshima Day event this Sunday in Shimane Prefecture. Takeshima is Japan's name for Dokdo. If Matsumoto attends, it will mark the third consecutive year that a parliamentary secretary has attended the event. Now, Seoul's foreign ministry reiterated today that Dokdo Island is rightfully Korean territory in terms of history, geography, and international law. The ministry added that it will firmly counter any provocations by Japan on this issue.
Moving on to other countries, Egypt, still burning with a desire to punish Islamic State militant groups for executing 21 Egyptian Christians, has launched a second wave of airstrikes on Islamic State targets in Libya. Cairo is now rallying more concerted international efforts towards destroying the extremist group. Our Kim Yeon-bin has this report.
Anger erupted in Egypt one day after the Islamic State militant group released a gruesome video showing the beheading of 21 Egyptian Christians. That rage rained down on IS-controlled areas in Libya, where the decapitations are believed to have taken place. Egyptian state television aired footage of fighter jets departing a hangar. The words "Long live Egypt" can be seen written on a jet's tail as it sets off on its mission. This was followed by night vision area footage showing airstrikes destroying reported IS camps, training sites, and weapons storage areas.
Of course, what happened is a barbaric and savage terrorist act that goes back to the Stone Age. I can't imagine who would do that. Egypt has every right to defend itself, and it must take steps against this type of terrorism carried out by those fundamentalists.
While the bombings were taking place, some of the victims' families held a funeral service for their loved ones in El Or village of Samalut, though their bodies presumably remain in Libya. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah Sisi is calling on the international community to expand its fight against the IS group beyond its strongholds in Iraq and Syria to include Libya. He says the situation in Libya is a clear threat to world peace and security. The UN Security Council and Secretary General Ban Ki-moon condemned the mass murder as heinous and cowardly. Pope Francis, in his Monday address, urged Catholics to remember their brothers who died for the mere fact of confessing Christ. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
And in Denmark, tens of thousands came together to mourn for the victims of the weekend's twin terror attacks. Around 40,000 people flocked to vigils across Copenhagen. Flowers were laid and candles lit in the colors of a nation that prides itself on its safety record. Denmark's prime minister pledged to remain strong and not be intimidated by extremist attacks on free speech and other liberties. As for the latest on the gunman, he is identified by local media as 22-year-old Omar El-Hussein. Authorities believe he may have been radicalized while he was in prison for a violent knife attack. El-Hussein was born and raised in Denmark and is not believed to be a part of a wider terrorist group. Doubts over Greece's €240 billion bailout package have been renewed. Negotiations between Greece and its creditors have fallen through for now. Athens is firm that it will no longer deal with any further austerity measures, while the group of Eurozone finance ministers say otherwise. Our Song Ji-sun reports.
Talks between Greece and Eurozone finance ministers over Athens' debt crisis broke down on Monday after Greece rejected a proposal for a 6-month extension of its international bailout package, calling it unacceptable. Eurozone ministers handed Greece an ultimatum on Monday to request an extension to its debt bailout program with the conditions unchanged.
Within that program, a lot of changes are possible. There is flexibility, but the main features of the program, keeping the budget on track, reforming the economy, have to be maintained. But the first step would be an extension, and then the second step is let's talk about the content of the program, but not the other way around.
The Eurogroup added the talks will not resume unless Athens submits an extension request by Friday. Greece is seeking to overhaul the terms of the $270 billion bailout package that comes attached with strong austerity measures.
And let's find common ground between the two. This is what we've been saying from the beginning. It's not a bluff, because it's the only option we have. It's plan A, there is no plan B.
Greece reaffirmed that it intends to stay within the Eurozone and that it's optimistic the two sides can reach an agreement before the package expires. The program ends on the last day of February, and if it does, Greece's coffers will likely run dry. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Business partners face a one-day entry ban. 77.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online, connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best. With Na Hyung-kyung and Daniel Che.
Arirang News.
Arirang News.
Arirang News.
On early edition at 6.
It was a widely expected move. Korea's central bank stood pat on its key interest rate of 2% for this month, but with scores of countries around the world loosening their monetary policies, expectations are mounting for a rate cut in the first half of this year. Our Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
The Bank of Korea kept its key interest rate steady at 2% for the fourth straight month on Tuesday. The top central banker said that more time is needed to determine whether the economy is on a solid recovery path, while expressing concerns over the snowballing household debt problem.
We've decided to hold the key rate to see how the downside risks and upward potential develop. We've also factored in the fast-growing household debt issue into our decision.
But market expectations are growing for a rate cut in the first half of this year. They're being driven by the still weak economic sentiment at home despite aggressive government stimulus measures, along with a wave of global monetary easing that countries like China, India, Japan, and Australia are engaged in.
Korea is heavily reliant on exports, and when other countries ease their monetary policies, it erodes the price competitiveness of local exporters. In that case, the Bank of Korea would want to take action.
While Korea's low inflation rate also leaves room for more monetary easing, the central bank governor said that the current 2% key rate at a record-matching low was not holding back economic growth. Following the monthly monetary policy meeting last month, he said the key rate is sufficient to support growth. Now, all eyes are on the central bank's new growth forecast set to be released in April, as a downward revision points to a need for further monetary easing to boost the ailing domestic economy. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Korea's producer prices fell in the meantime for the 6th straight month in January to their lowest level in more than 4 years. The central bank says last month's producer price index slipped 1.2% from December. That's the lowest level recorded since November 2010. Compared to the same period last year, producer prices tumbled 3.6%. Posting the sharpest annual decline since mid-2009. The central bank attributed the continuing drop to falling global oil prices.
Korea's southern port city of Busan has blossomed into one of the country's best cultural and tourism hubs over the years. But some in the metropolis feel the city has lost some of its spark. Kim Young-gil sat down with a local legislator to find out what can be done to regain its former glory.
Busan, probably known for its annual film festival and the G-Star Global Game Exhibition, is striving to become a global city. What more does it need to do, and what other investments need to be made in order to make it a competitive global city?
I believe Busan can gain competitiveness on the global stage by expanding the convention industry and revitalizing the economy of the western part of Busan, which is lagging behind in development compared to the eastern part of the city.
Busan wants to build a new airport and is currently bidding for the 2028 Summer Olympics, which is all part of the future vision for the city. All of these projects will require a significant investment. What do you think about the values of all the projects in relation to the size of the investment?
Focusing on external development is important with the Olympics, as you mentioned, but I believe working toward internal stability is also important. Busan is facing problems such as elderly poverty and increasing suicide rates, both of which are far above the national average. There need to be policies that can help boost quality of life for the citizens of Busan.
In fact, all these problems could apply to other cities in Korea too. How do we move away from metropolitan development and toward balanced regional development?
Busan is barely keeping its title as Korea's second largest metropolis after Seoul. Cities like Busan need to encourage balanced regional development to ensure national competitiveness. National policies should be oriented towards helping people who live in provincial cities to establish a firm footing in their hometowns.
As a member of the Parliamentary Committee for Education, Culture, Sports and Tourism, what are you hoping to achieve this year?
In order to keep Busan from slipping into decline, I think we need to make education the top priority. Many of Busan's young students are leaving to go to universities in Seoul because they feel a gap in educational opportunities. I think my duty is to narrow the gap with the capital region.
Thank you, lawmaker, for speaking with us today.
고맙습니다.
Moving on to other stories, Korea hopes to launch its own lunar probe in the year 2020. A prototype has been made and it's awaiting further approval for further development, that is. This is the first step to the final product. All right, Kim Min-ji has more.
With 6 wheels on a body made of 2 parts that are connected, this rover can move freely across rough terrain and bumpy surfaces. Even with obstacles in the way, it can move easily. This is the prototype of a lunar probe called the KEAST rover, which Korean researchers hope to launch come 2020. Now it needs to undergo testing to determine whether it will be able to operate in the extreme conditions on the moon, where temperatures range from minus 170 degrees Celsius to 130 degrees.
All of the electrical and mechanical parts are loaded inside the body, so they can endure the lunar environment. Also, the conjoined body allows it to move easily.
The researchers have also developed the technology to ensure the sustained movement of the ball bearings.
In order to operate in extreme environmental conditions, we need to use solid lubricants. Silver or lead or other metal lubricants that are durable in extreme temperatures are used to give the surface a thin coating.
When the prototype is determined as suitable, 3 models will be made in succession and put through further testing. The first model will be made with lower quality materials to test the mechanics, the second with the actual materials to test for durability, and the final will be made for flight. If and when the KEIST rover is launched, Korea will become the world's 4th country to launch a lunar probe after the US, Russia, and China. 김민지, Arirang News.
Well, let's switch to a different subject. Very imminent subject, that is. The entire nation is getting ready for the Lunar New Year holiday now.
But before packing things up to go home, what most Koreans do is send gifts to family and friends in advance, so you can imagine how busy it's going to be for the nation's postal delivery workers.
Well, let's check out how difficult they have things right now. While others celebrate, they have to work double shifts probably. Our Shin Se-min has this story.
'Tis the season. The postal service in Korea gets flooded with packages filled with items like fresh fruit, meat, health products, and other popular seasonal gifts. They will be shipped to cities and towns across the country ahead of Lunar New Year's Day.
Piles of packages. Over 500,000 parcels are being checked in and out of this distribution center every day, at least during this time of the year. The amount? Nearly double the usual, forcing the Postal Service to expand its manpower by 10% for the holiday rush.
While there is definitely gratitude owed to the senders of these items, the back-breaking work of local postal and delivery service people should not be forgotten.
네, 안녕하세요. 택배 기사인데요. 네, 알겠습니다. 지금 올라갈게요. 택배요.
Lee Chung-hee has been delivering some 300 boxes a day, trying to keep up with the rush of packages. His days have gotten longer, and his nights of rest much shorter.
정말 싫죠.
I don't really look forward to the holidays. I used to like them, but being in this profession has changed my perspective. Now, I personally hand-deliver gifts to my relatives.
Despite the drawbacks, Lee still gives 110% to his work.
It's a little nerve-wracking. I have to be careful that I don't lose or mishandle any of the packages, especially because I know they're gift boxes.
And thanks to Lee and others like him in the delivery service, hundreds of thousands of people across the country will be able to share and enjoy an even happier holiday this year. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Well, thanks goes out to the unsung heroes of the holiday.
Of course.
And now let's talk about the weather. It was a gray and rainy day for everyone across the nation.
That's right. And apparently we are expecting heavy amounts of snow in Gangwon-do province throughout the evening. For details, let's go over to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center. Michelle.
Well, good evening, guys. The snow that has been falling over the country has now gone away, except along the east coast and Gangwon-do province, where, as you mentioned, Pyongyang, we're expecting a lot more snow in the upcoming hours. So for those of you in these regions, make sure to dress warmly and drive carefully. Now, as for tomorrow, which is the beginning of Lunar New Year holiday here in Korea, we're expecting mostly cloudy skies, but with mild temperatures, and snow will continue to fall on Gangwon-do province and the east coastal regions due to the influence of low pressure trough moving up north. But after that, the snow is expected to clear, giving us some nice weather for an outing or a drive for those of you still heading home for the holidays. And the roads will be wet again on Saturday and Sunday across the nation, so stay updated with the weather and plan your time on the roads accordingly. Now let's have a look at the readings for tomorrow. So we'll start off the Wednesday morning at -1 and gets up to 6 in the afternoon, while Daegu and Busan will top out higher at 7 and 9 degrees. And moving over to other regions, Jeju-Wallen gets up to 8 degrees, Dokdo hits 3, while Mankungang dips low to -4. Well, that's all for me at this hour. I'm Michelle Park, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thanks for that, Michelle. That does it for us. For any of you watching who are celebrating this holiday, do have a great Lunar New Year holiday. This has been Daniel Che.
And I'm Na Hyun-kyung. Do be careful on the roads if you are driving back to your hometown. Goodbye for now.